Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Advertising Club of Toronto's very first Media Day. My name is Chris Ramey. I am the president of the Ad Club, and I'm very excited for today's session as this is our first event focused on the Quebec market. Our team has assembled a great collection of speakers who are all experts on the nuances of the Quebec media landscape and how to best reach its Francophone and Anglophone audiences. For those of you who are not familiar with the Ad Club, we are a not-for-profit organization that hosts both social and educational events for the Canadian marketing industry. All the money that we do raise goes back to our industry through our partnership with NABS and also through our support of student bursaries, as we really want to help that next generation of students coming into our marketing industry. If you'd like to learn more about the Ad Club, or join our mailing list, or even join one of our committees, please visit adclub.ca or reach out to myself on LinkedIn. And for our upcoming events, we're very excited that we have Golf Day coming up on July 21st, and also we'll be having our annual summer party in August. Details are soon to come for the summer party. And we're super excited for these events. Thanks to the pandemic, we haven't had either of them since 2019. So it'll be great to get everyone back together and see you all in person again. Now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Suzanne Perron, who will be kicking off our Media Buying in Quebec event.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you to everyone who is virtually attending this inaugural Media Buying in Quebec event. In the next 90 minutes, we'll be delving into how to best reach and engage the voluminous Quebec audience, as well as infusing some uniquely Québécois joie de vivre. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Buying Media in Quebec small but mighty committee that made this event possible, Kimberly Rouse from Quebecers and Véronique Barbeau from AdApt Media. We would also like to thank the event sponsors, Postmedia. Postmedia, the network, is a trusted and reliable Canadian media reaching 20 million readers each month, providing clients with the benefit of exclusive access to owned and operated advertising channel and a wealth of first-party data that enables better campaign performance. Postmedia, powered by audience, propelled by data. Causal IQ. Causal IQ is a programmatic solutions provider powered by data science driving performance through digital media. Leveraging proprietary data assets and custom modeling techniques, Causal IQ yields unduplicated returns on KPIs. Causal IQ works closely with many top brands and agencies, partners on their digital planning strategies and execution. And Quebecers, with 99% reach, Quebecers platforms accompany target audiences throughout their customer journey. With its unique multi-platform offerings, Quebecers offers options from activation ranging from transactional media to custom content creation, which combine to offer opportunities to interact with your audience at every level of the sales funnel. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming our esteemed moderator, Martine Saint-Victor.
Bonjour, merci Suzanne. Hello to everyone, it's nice to meet you. My name is Martine Saint-Victor. I am the general manager of the Edelman office in Montreal. I also write for the Montreal Gazette and for La Presse. I will, without further ado, introduce, actually there will be some a little moment before I introduce our esteemed panel. I wanted to let you know we will have 15 minutes at the end for your questions. In the meantime, you can drop them in the Q&A box and we'll get to them at the end of the discussion with our panels. And here they are. The first one is Danick Archambault. He is partner at Jungle Media. Danick leads the activities of Jungle Media in Quebec, an entity of Plus Company, specializing in media planning and buying. Before that, he worked at Astral and Bell Media as general marketing director. He also worked for nearly 10 years at Cossette Media on behalf of numerous advertisers, leading planning teams being responsible for digital media planning and purchasing for all of the agency's clients. He is passionate about media and innovation. Danick is involved in the Quebec advertising industry. For nearly 3 years, he was president of the Quebec Council of Media Directors. He is also a lecturer in the master's program in applied communication at the University of Sherbrooke and a trainer at Campus InfoPresse. And because it's not enough, he sits on various committees, including La Ruche Montérégie and the foundation of the Montreal Geriatric Institute. In 2017, Danick was named one of the 10 InfoPress Personalities of the Year, having marked Quebec's digital business, communications, marketing, media, and design through his vision, ideas, and spirit. I almost feel like I should take a nap. That was very long and impressive. As impressive, Jerome Lays, who's Senior Director, Media Solutions, Multi-Platform, Toronto of Quebecers, experienced Solutions Director with a demonstrated history of working in the media industry. Jerome is responsible for the Toronto team of Multi-Platform National Account Directors of Quebecers. His team manages transactional media investments from advisors outside Quebec, primarily in Toronto, but including Western Canada and the US. With a background in broadcast, print, and out of home, he leads a team working in media agencies and advertisers, covering all aspects of the business partnership from media agreements to project and content development. He also works with other teams in Quebec to optimize the advertiser experience. Jerome is also a member of the board of Vivi Data. Next with us, we have Brad Jocelyn, who is Director of Sales at Causal IQ. Brad heads up the partnerships there in Canada, as well as in the West Coast of the United States. Causal IQ is a leading programmatic solutions provider that leverages unique data and optimization technology to create a causal relationship between consumers and advertisers, both on and offline. It has a unique approach to executing the most effective campaigns by marketing to individual rather than segments across the entire consumer journey. Brad has deep background in activating digital campaigns globally across many sectors. Prior to media, Brad was an entrepreneur and executive in the music industry. Next, we have Basil Hatto, who is VP Data Science, Audience Development, and Analytics for Postmedia. Basil has spent the last 16 years in various digital and technology roles in Canada and in the United States, managing both product and innovation for some of the leading agencies and brands across North America. In his current role, he acts as the catalyst for elevating Postmedia's data science and analytics function, delivering solutions to help executives scale and transform Postmedia through data intelligence and technology. Suzanne Perron is B2B marketing manager with over 10 years experience working in both the English et en français publisher ecosystem. Suzanne has in-depth knowledge of the nuances of both markets. She has worked with brands such as El Canada, El Quebec, Style at Home, Canadian Living, the Montreal Gazette, Coup de Pouce, and Clin d'œil. Previously, the owner of a national distribution organization specialized in launching US and international brands to the Canadian market, Suzanne has firsthand knowledge of the intricacies needed to launch effective 360 campaigns that reach both the French and English audiences. She's also passionate about promoting the Quebec culture en français et en anglais and highlighting the amazing creator community in the province. Ladies and gentlemen, that was your panel. Very impressive. I am a little bit exhausted. These are very remarkable careers. Congratulations to you all. We are very lucky to get your insight today and to have you amongst us. So I'm going to start with Jerome and with Danick. Tell us, what makes buying media in Quebec unique?
Thanks, Martine. I think the key thing to keep in mind when you're buying media in Quebec is that at the base, Quebec consumers do not consume media the same way that the rest of Canada does. And this is where the key problem occurs when there's national planning going on, because they simply don't use the platforms the same way. So if you're looking at digital, they spend less time on digital. But within that, everybody's big on connected TV these days. Well, if you look at Quebec consumers, the trend is up on broadcaster websites, whereas in the rest of Canada, the one that's growing is, your traditional subscription sites. Print, which, you just mentioned, Suzanne has such a background in Quebec. In Canada, so sometimes you feel like people forgotten it's even existed, but in Quebec, it's still around, it's still happening, the readerships are still relevant. Something like out of home even, which people might think that's pretty standard, but a lot of the markets in Quebec actually offer more opportunities for stunts and to do things that are more flexible than a lot of the English markets. Obviously, there's the opportunity for integration, which I think we're going to talk about a little more through some of the other questions. But the biggest one also is on TV. Live viewing of television in Quebec is simply still much higher. And what's key is when people are thinking of linear television, if you look at the Quebec reach right now, it is at this moment equal to what English Canada was 5 or 6 years ago. So all the adapting that's been going on to make up for the drops in linear and English Canada have not happened in Quebec. And specialty television is not as strong. So if you plan too much of that, you're going to run into problems. And Quebec even has stronger fringe. So you can actually buy lower prime and still have your whole reach. So when you add all of those things together, if you don't adapt, and if you sort of buy Quebec the same way as the rest, the question is, when you look at the actual budgets that are being invested, the question I always ask is Quebec actually getting its fair share? Or are people using the fact that Quebec's often a little more efficient to spend a little less money than they should there?
Thank you. Danny?
Yes. Bonjour tout le monde. So like Jerome said, I think, it's unique because there's a lot of, I would say, uniqueness in Quebec. First of all, the media landscape is pretty unique. As Jerome said, the situation of the different platforms are different, are unique in Quebec. We have a solid, I think, media industry offering a lot of different opportunities, but also we have what we say in French, une ouverture sur le monde. So we look at, new platforms. Maybe we're getting those into our habits a little bit later, maybe versus rest of Canada, but we're getting there. So it's getting, we're getting to a more diversified media landscape. So just there, it's getting unique. Also, I think consumer, which is, the number one thing important to our business, are really engaging differently with media. So as Jerome mentioned, we still have big rendezvous in Quebec, big television series. We have our Super Bowl, not in sports, but at the end of the year with the bye-bye. Last time the bye-bye was almost 5 million people in front of their TV screen looking at a humorous review of the year. And the year last year was not that good, as you know. So we have to, obviously, I think people needs to laugh about it even more. But, having those big rendezvous, but at the same time having a lot of diversified options to reach those consumers, and also people react and engage more with linear TV, radio, all type of media. Also, I think our unique star system, really important, as also we're talking about integration, but people and how our stars can also work with brands is pretty unique. And finally, I think our advertising industry in a nutshell is pretty unique too. We work in 2 languages. We work with partners. I think we know how to collaborate in a good way for brands, for consumer, and to make sure everybody getting their fair share and value to every advertising action we do. So I think that's why it's pretty unique.
Thank you, Danik. Thank you, Jerome. And Danik, you mentioned rendezvous, so TV appointments, and you mentioned the year-end show, which is the bye-bye. I think it's important to also share with our colleagues that every week we have TV shows that federate over 1 million persons. So shows like Tout le monde en parle, but yes, on every Sunday night, but also whenever we have these types of reality shows, it's over 1 million viewers, and that's every week, which is pretty unique. I think we have radio shows as well that are in French, but that have larger audiences than radio shows in English that are broadcasted all over Canada. So that is also a way to measure how unique we are here. You also mentioned, Yannick, you mentioned our our star system. And I'm going to get Suzanne's take on it, and maybe Jerome, if you can come back to it. Can you give us an illustration of how the star system is different in Quebec and how it works? Suzanne?
Well, due to their linguistic and cultural uniqueness, Quebec strives to produce their own culture. Unlike English Canadians who consume American culture, it's very much an effective principle of survival. We have our own, what we call Hollywood PQ. So it's a whole system of where we have our own celebrities that really are cultivated here in Quebec out of necessity. Because we don't necessarily follow the American culture or the American star system. Daniel Lemaire, former president of Cercle du Soleil, resumed it. We're isolated here as a Francophone Quebecers on an Anglophone content. So we are focused on innovation and creating different aspects of art. We had to create and support our own culture because the North American culture doesn't really belong to us. So that's where we have these new creator communities, very niched, coming out of Quebec. And it's very good for advertisers to work with these creators, because Quebec advertisers that use a Quebec spokesperson or Quebecois humor is 25% more effective. Advertising created in Quebec is 31% more effective than advertising created elsewhere and translated in Quebec. It's important to understand that just translation is not, the syntax will not create that intimacy, that engagement with a homegrown person, celebrity from Quebec. Recently, I went to an event for the Grand Prix, and it was really our Quebec star system. And when I looked at who we were promoting, which was like L'Île de l'Amour, which in Canada is Love Island. These are the people that were at the event. The star system in Quebec, I don't think necessarily the Canadian community would know who these people are. But here in Quebec, they have a huge following in terms of social, in terms of TikTok. They're really great creators, but unique to Quebec. And I think that really makes a difference. We also have a print in terms of like our magazine star system. I believe it's 7 or 8 that are uniquely just for the star system here and the celebrity system here in Quebec, with these magazines creating their own ecosystem for this environment. And I think that a lot of brands such as Tim Hortons or L'Oreal, they'll take spokespeople here from Quebec, and it really makes a difference. I was joking before we started this conversation. I was drinking my Tim Hortons. Well, my Tim Hortons is blue because it was Saint Jean Baptiste. So when we really cultivate this type of environment with these creators, it really gives for that more engaged campaign.
Thank you, Suzanne. And Jerome, before I go back to you, Suzanne, there are 2 things that you said I think we can even push a little further. When you spoke about L'Oreal using Quebec celebrities, it has to be said that it's in the context of international campaigns. Years ago, it was the same thing. Gap had an international campaigns with international superstars, and they had someone from Quebec as well. And you also mentioned tabloids. So we have our own versions of People Magazine, etc. Jerome, this is your wheelhouse. Talk to us a little bit about that. And maybe you have some, I don't want to put you on the spot, but maybe if you don't have numbers, can you confirm that readership is still very, very high?
Yes, absolutely. We have a whole stable of magazines that cover all of this. So, everything from, the more TV guide feeling thing to more People to some of the stuff that's really almost more just gossipy. And we have the whole gamut of publications, and they're still going strong, and people are still picking them up, as they check out of the supermarket, and they're going on about the lives of the stars and who's with whom and who's doing what and who's in what show. I often find something I notice when we're promoting programming in Ontario, a lot of what we get from Quebec is always talking about who wrote the show. And we're always looking at them like our audience here doesn't care who wrote the show, but in Quebec it matters. They know the writers. It goes beyond just the actors. Like they know who wrote the show. They're familiar and obviously the magazines keep that going. But to add to what Suzanne said, it's really about resonating with the Quebec people. I mean, which if you think about it, makes sense. Most people will work better with something that resonates with them culturally. It's just Quebec happens to be a little surrounded by a bunch of culture that doesn't necessarily match theirs. But it's some of the details really matter, and things like even the accent on a dubbing. You got to understand that France is not. It's not just about French. France is not any better than an English accent. And we always joke about how we broadcast, the voice, and in Quebec, we translate it to la voix. And we always joke about in France, they call it the voice. They use the English word with a bit of French accent. And, in France, that's great. In Quebec, that would not work. And we've worked with some clients. Sometimes if, you can't afford a spokesperson, it's not always easy to redo a whole thing, but sometimes it's look at your commercials for things like, does the plumber in your commercial have a jacket on with his name and it's like a super Anglo name? That's going to disconnect. Something that simple, if you made it more neutral, would already help you go 50% of the way to having people feel less disconnected with what they just saw. So advertisers have a lot of options they can work with to try and find ways to connect better. And the question I always ask is when people are doing media, they always go on about, production is non-working dollars. And I always make the argument that if you're spending money in Quebec to adapt to resonate better with the audience, that's a working dollar, because that money you're spending is going to help you be more effective. So you should definitely look at how you're thinking of that as, I try to avoid production, because that production go a long way to helping you go further and tap into that uniqueness that is the Quebec market.
Thank you, Jerome. I think it's also the tabloid industry has created an intimacy, and Jerome, you can attest to the fact that in your magazines there are some celebrities we've been following for 20 years, for 30 years. So it's really as if we know them. So the resonance is deep and multi-generational, which is.
I've always said it must be awesome to be a Quebec celebrity, though, because I think in Quebec you get the full weight of being a celebrity, but then you can leave and be anonymous, right? I think a lot of the American celebrities probably dream of having that flexibility, but yeah, within Quebec they're completely well known, and they appear on TV, and there's a whole mechanism that keeps all of this going.
No, absolutely. And so I'm going to throw out some slides from our Edelman Trust Barometer. And I'll explain to you first what's the genesis of the Trust Barometer. So every year, Edelman conducts this study, and it measures the trust we have into four institutions, four entities. So it's government, it's NGOs, it's businesses, and it's media. And if we can see the slides, that would be great. Thank you. We can go to the next one. So you will see that first of all, here you will see what's interesting is you see the percentage of trust in media reports, and you can compare it to government, to corporations, to advertising, to our own social media feed. And we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So again, here you see how, what's the perception of media. So 44% see media as a dividing force, 32% seeing as a unifying force. But what I wanted to show you mostly, and we can go to the next slide, please, is that here you'll see how social media also measures. But there's an important number. It's not in the slides, but I'll share it with you. In Quebec, 59% of people trust the media. In the rest of Canada, that number falls to 52%. And so I have various theories, but I would love to hear Jerome, Danique, and Suzanne about their take. Why is it that in Quebec, 59% of us trust the media, and in the rest of Canada, it's only 52%? By the way, both numbers terrible. let's agree on that. Too low, but still, please, your insight. Suzanne, first.
Sure. Traditional media gives back to the community and supports the community, especially in Quebec, where outside influences are less prevalent and we are more sheltered from the US influences. Both the English and French media have deep roots in Quebec. We spoke about the Montreal Gazette. It's Quebec's oldest daily newspaper and Canada's oldest daily newspaper still in publication. And the columnists such as Bill Brownstein have gained the trust of the population, again, going back to what Jerome said, for 20, 30 years. The media, the local traditional media supports the community. Montreal Gazette has a branded Christmas fund that has given back 25 million since its inception. And here in Quebec, we have La Guignolée des Médias, where 16 traditional medias from Québécois to Radio-Canada unite to raise funds for the underprivileged at Christmas. That's raised over 45 million in the last 20 years. I've personally seen Pierre Cal-Pelado, the owner of Québécois, outside in the freezing cold, getting donations for these events. So I think the proximity of the Quebec media to its audience creates and curates trust. Quebecers are fiercely protective of their culture, and traditional media isn't a threat to this. It respects it, it supports local causes. Traditional media is integral part of the community. Quebecers are also more risk averse in nature than the rest of Canada. Therefore, traditional media is familiar and they feel safer and they trust it more than newer medias. And again, going back to the US and their influences, Quebec is less influenced by the US polarizing views on media. I think a lot of the fake news aspect that comes from our neighbors in the US is not as easily transcribed here in Quebec. So it creates less skepticism around the integrity of the media because we don't have those influences of, let's say, the fake news coming from the US side of the border.
Thanks, Suzanne. Jerome, what is your take? Why is it that in Quebec, 59% of us trust the media and in the rest of Canada, it's only 52%?
I mean, just to expand on what Suzanne said, it's, you know, as much as said they are risk averse, the other thing they also are is loyal and they don't change easily. So as long as they have something that's been working for them and that they're okay with, the loyalty is much stronger. So you're definitely going to get more of an effect there. And beyond what Suzanne said, in terms of the local involvement, is definitely very strong. But if you go beyond just the local involvement on the ground, just in terms of the content, if they don't trust their local media, they're not going to get any reflection of themselves anywhere else, whether it be in news, but also culturally. So they don't have, there's almost no other option. If they don't trust their local media anymore, they got nowhere else to turn to see anything that's relevant to themselves or that speaks about their experience. And I think that's one of the key things is you mix that with the general tendency to be loyal and not want to change, and you've got yourself a trend where they're sticking with their local media more than the rest of Canada, who's probably much more easily influenced and attracted to lots of other sources.
That's interesting. And I think we should also mention in Quebec how we have a strong tradition of international bureaus for news coverage, which really makes a difference. So it's our, we can hear our accent on the field of where current events. So I think that makes a difference. Danique, what about you? What's your take? Why 59% in Quebec versus 52% in the rest of Canada?
Yeah, but to echo Suzanne and Jerome, definitely the fact that the media are really close to the community, the proximity, also the legacy of those media. They've been there for a long time, credible for a long time. And it's funny because in the last 2 weeks in Quebec, there was some great journalists, you know, that's been around for a long time, who are part of the family, who are now taking time for them after a wonderful career. So you have Pierre Bruno at TVA, you have Joël Lebigot, who was a radio host at Radio-Canada, the morning man. He was the voice that I hear when I was young just before school and all that. So there also Jacques Fabi, who was the night guy in radio for about 45 years. Those people were there, credible for at least 45, even 50 years. So people, you know, it's not like we trust media, but we trust the people also sharing the news and all that. And I think that was something really important in Quebec. Also, maybe one thing, I think one aspect of the Quebec personality is the fact that we like consensus. We talk about France before, Jerome mentioned about it. You know, France, it's debating a subject is part of their culture. In Quebec, you can debate, but a little bit less. It's more like we want to, you know, it's fun first. We want to make sure everybody is fine. But consensus means we will go to different type of sources. So also we have different type of news source in Quebec who are, you know, credible, like that we can trust. I think all of that, it's part of the reason why we have some trust in our local medias in Quebec.
Great insight, thank you. Basil, can you tell me how can brands, how can organization reach Quebec audience in an efficient way?
Bonjour, everyone. So I would say maybe there's three key aspects as you go through media planning that is really critical. One is understanding the uniqueness of the channels that are available in Quebec. That's really important. So you have your traditional social platforms and your traditional video platforms, but Quebec has that added special channel features, programs that are very unique and dear to the audiences. And understanding the uniqueness of those platforms and the content that they're consuming is really critical. Another aspect that we see really critical for brands is recognizing that you can't just plan for Quebec as a whole, because data will somehow always seep in and over-index Montreal. And Quebec is much larger than that as well. Montreal is a very important part of the Quebec. Montreal itself is very diverse, having lived there for 16 years as well. It's a fantastic boiling pot of cultures, but also when you plan from a data or statistical mindset, recognizing that there's these other regions that are available across the province is really critical. You normalize your data and your reach. And that's a very important function when you go down the path. The third one is more emphasis on messaging. And we've seen this more so than the rest of Canada. In my experience in the space, we spend more time customizing and personalizing messaging in Quebec. And Suzanne spoke about this. It's not about translation, it's about localization, but also within the cultures that are available within Quebec as well. It's how you create and leverage messaging to be able to speak to each of those segments differently. We've seen the impact of that customization and messaging yield more results and better efficiency, as you mentioned, than the rest of Canada, just English in general. So I'd say these are really, guiding principles like that we think every brand should follow.
That's interesting. So I have a follow-up question, because this is very educational to me. When you say that even in Quebec, you have to be mindful of the message and it's about localization, could we not say the same thing about Toronto, for example, that has so many, that is so diverse? Or you cannot, if you have someone in Toronto or someone in Calgary, these are two different cultures. Why specifically in Quebec, in your view, is this specific messaging important?
I think the consequences of getting it wrong in Quebec are much more for brands than it is for the rest of Canada.
Interesting. So it's about risk and crisis, something I know a little something about. Very good, very good. And so I'll go to the others. How can brands and organization reach a Quebec audience? Do you have other insights?
I can jump in there. Yeah, I was actually drafting as well. I think Basil's completely right, and also drafting on what Jerome was saying earlier. Creative really is a working dollar. but then it's about matching that creative with the right individuals. And I think as far as when we're talking about how can we better reach audiences, to your point, Martin, it's about better efficiency and better performance. And a lot of that comes down to being smart with data. Also drafting on what Basil was saying. So it's really thinking about taking an individual approach to who we serve creative to and really holistically understanding that individual. I'll give you an example. If we're marketing to an SAQ shopper, are we just going after a wine drinker that's 25 to 34, or do we want to know her fitness habits, her dining habits, her transactional history, to really get a holistic understanding and decide all those different attributes about a person, what makes them decide to shop or make purchases, is really, really critical to be efficient with media. Other things we're seeing too is getting smarter about, and we'll probably talk about this a bit later, but an omni-channel approach, right? How are we linking serving an ad in CTV environment to audio, to display, to rich media, and making sure we're optimizing for frequency and things like that. And then finally, it's super important to be executing campaigns and learning from them and having the right insights so that you can look at, for example, who is my English creative connecting with in Quebec versus my French? What's different about those audiences? Are we learning anything about our channels so that we can make better decisions going forward? And that's how you kind of continue to iterate and keep that cycle going as well.
Thank you. I just wanted to precise, Brad, you mentioned SAQ. So for those who don't know, SAQ is our Société des Alcools, so it's the equivalent of the LCBO. And so I'm going to open the floor to all of you. It's a little bit of a dicey question, but I know we're in good hands with people with great insight. How have Quebec politics impacted how you execute at all ad buying or creative, or maybe it hasn't at all, has it?
Martin, I could say that with the new laws that are being proposed and put in place in Quebec, it's solidifying the importance of preserving the culture in Quebec, and advertisers need to lean in and embrace this in their creative strategies. I think that that's really what these laws are going to, the laws are more linguistic in nature, but I think the importance concept, the overall analyzing concept of it is that we need to embrace the culture of Quebec. We have to be very respectful of the culture and how we interact with it. And these laws are basically put in place for that continuity of the language, of the culture. And I think when brands, like I mentioned before, I showed my beautiful blue Tim Hortons cup. Justin Bieber, when Tim Biebs came out, not only was it not translated, the spokesperson spoke French in the ads. And I think that that's what's going to resonate with the audiences and engage the audiences in Quebec. And that's in accordance to what these new bills are being proposed. It's really about preserving that unique culture in Quebec.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else has insight on the politics? Danik?
No, but I will echo again what Susan said. I think it's just see that as an opportunity to be as close and have proximity with the culture, because again, like a good example with Tim Hortons, we mentioned that just before. Justin Bieber talking in French with a huge accent, bigger than mine right now in English, sorry, actually is more credible, and people I think love it in a sense that, okay, of course we know that he's a English person living in California, born and raised in Ontario, but you know, obviously this company, this brand, you know, connect with us with this international star. So I think it's to take the opportunity, see how we could be and go beyond those, I would say, those laws or linguistic aspect, and really embrace the culture and be as local as possible. So, and not only with the media or the tactic you use, but the message and how you engage with a brand. And you know, and to go, you know, how we can better reach is also, if I can continue on that, just a quick note, it's also to follow the media habit. And for that is, don't take anything for granted. there's some evolution. With the pandemic last 2 years, so many things change, some things coming back, obviously, but so for example, there's a lot of a diversified mix is really important to reach effectively, as Brad mentioned, like to be omnichannel. But on the other hand, like you mentioned earlier, Martin, if you want to reach the Quebecers on Sunday night, TV is a good bet, because either they listen to Tout le monde en parle, or Occupation Double, or Star Academy, or The Voice, or La Voix. So it's really based on data, and make sure we are ready to follow the consumer appropriately.
Yeah, all TV shows, once again, that get more than 1 million viewers. That is really exceptional. And I think, Suzanne, you gave the example of Justin Bieber and Tim Hortons, and Danique, you came back to it. I think it's obvious that for the brand it's worked, because this is an exercise they had done with Sidney Crosby as well, speaking French in the commercial. So it's when it works, it shows. So
I can give you an example of, and I'll only mention somebody who did something badly because they're not around anymore. So otherwise it would be kind of rude. But the fine folks at Sears, before their demise, thought it would be a really good idea to have a Saint-Jean-Baptiste print ad, because they're like, oh, it's important in Quebec. And the people at their creative agency were like, oh, well, we don't have an ad for that. And they're like, oh, let's just use the Canada Day creative. And they put this big old like red and white maple leaf thing on Saint-Jean-Baptiste. And it went from being a cultural blunder to like a political one, right? So that took on a dimension way beyond just not resonating. It was almost like they were making this statement on Quebec's National Day. So, you do want to be a little careful with your creative. But to go back to some of what Suzanne was saying in terms of just the language laws, we want to encourage people to not be afraid of all this, because sometimes people will be like, I'm just not going to do Quebec because I can't do my ad. Well, you might not be able to do exactly what you're planning on doing in Quebec, but there's lots of ways around it. And there's lots of people in the ad world, at all the media players as well, who know all the rules and will help you adapt. And so it's nothing that you need to be afraid of. All of these things have solutions. There's always a way to do what you're planning to do. To Basil's point, we have a lot of research that can help us direct and pinpoint what the best place to go is in Quebec. And you shouldn't, yes, promotions and contests are harder to do because of the fine folks at the Régie. There's lots of things that might be a stumbling block that do all have simple solutions. We just need to take a minute to think a little bit outside the box and be willing to do it differently.
And Jerome, we still spend money regardless of politics. So
exactly.
That's the bottom line.
That's the bottom line.
In
fact, research shows that for a lot of categories, you spend more money, whereas the rest of Canada is saving and squirreling away. Quebecers are out spending. So really, we should be talking to them even more.
And Martin, I'd like to come back to what Jerome said too. I think that organizations and brands have to look at really using agencies that are in the know of the culture of Quebec. I think that Sears is an example. And recently I was on a career site for a huge tech company that was promoting working in Toronto, and they're saying the home of the poutine. Not only do Quebec is fiercely protective and proud of their culture and proud of their, I would say, poutine or things that originate in the province. So when you use local agencies, or you use organizations that understand the cultural nuances, you get more bang for your buck, and you're really not going to have that worry about how your message is going to be translated. IKEA has an amazing campaign running in Quebec, kind of using their the names of their products that are they sound like swear words in Quebec, and they use it to their advantage. But they went with a creative strategy that speaks to Quebecers, and that is uniquely messaging that is going to engage the audience.
Yes, that the IKEA commercial, the IKEA ad is actually spectacular. Brad, can you share with us some of the interesting media channels right now, and what trends in media do you foresee for 2023?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I'd say, I'll speak sort of globally, but also locally in Quebec. I mean, again, speaking to omnichannel, I mean, the pandemic really drove a massive growth in digital as a whole. Obviously, Quebec is a little bit different than the rest of Canada, but video, CTV, OTT, and audio have been big winners. So when you're looking at things like CTV and OTT, obviously with linear, there's a great opportunity in Sunday evenings with, as we mentioned, but there's so much opportunity to be data driven and connect with cord cutters and cord nevers. There's some really interesting opportunities in interactive ad units that have QR codes, shoppable units. And then targeting and reporting insights that you can gather straight from CTV into even a bottom funnel sales transaction is pretty impressive what's happening as an industry right now. Audio, we're seeing big growth in, you know, even from clients that were saying, you know, okay, yeah, I'm doing audio, so I do a buy on Spotify. It's getting much more sophisticated like it is in other channels where you can be targeted, driven by across, you know, thousands of different podcasts, French and English, and music streaming sites. So really being able to connect with audiences in a non-visual medium that drives really strong recall, and again, can be tied to specific business results like sales. And then finally, yeah, I mean, Jerome was talking about it a little bit earlier too, but digital out of home is seeing a big resurgence. Obviously, people are on the move again. But digital out of home offers some really cool opportunities. It's obviously not one-to-one, but it's one-to-many. But you can still be smart with data as far as connecting it into an omni-channel experience of serving ads to people you want after in the right venues, but also being able to retarget them on mobile. All sorts of really cool, I will say sometimes a bit creepy types of things that you can do, but great stuff. One of the other sort of key trends that we're seeing and something to keep an eye on too is something called zero-party data. So we work with several partners, but these are third-party partners that collect information from consumers in exchange typically for rewards, loyalty points, and things like that. And then that data can be used to activate media. And it's great because firms that are programmatic can leverage it for optimization and modeling to find other profiles. And the data tends to be very, very custom and very, very deep. So it gives you a lot of opportunity to find the audiences you want to go after. And most importantly, which we'll probably talk about later, it's also opt-in, so it doesn't have any sort of privacy concerns associated with it. So those are a few of the trends that we're seeing.
Thank you. And Suzanne, what about you? What's your insight on what to look out for in 2023?
I think specifically for speaking of Quebec, trusted content from niche providers. I think we're really going to have to go niche to scale, scale to niche to scale, however you want to say it, that it's not going to be volume, but it's going to be how you're targeting those very specific audiences in Quebec. I think short form video will continue to thrive. But with local, like micro influencers, micro creators, I think of TikTok. There's a big French audience creating in the French language on these types of platforms. I think that we are maybe not the first ones to adapt to these technologies, but we are coming in strong. I think 2023, we're going to see these niche creators really take advantage of the platforms. I think creativity will be key to engagement, especially for Quebecers are very, like I said before, risk averse. We're very méfiant. So we're not sure if we don't do well with contesting because we're not sure if we're going to get had if we put our names in a contest. So I think that being creative and really engaging in the end user and using the local star system, I think is really going to be for Quebec, for someone who wants that engagement, very important. And again, with the proposed new laws and with the way the environment is in Quebec, really adapting to understand the culture, the nuances, and working with these types of creators and with these types of agencies to make sure that you're getting the right message to the right people.
Thank you. Basil, can you explain it to us as if we didn't go to Harvard Tech School or anything like that, cookieless future. And how are, what's the status right now in your experience, and how of the cookieless future, but also how are brands and agencies adjusting?
And by the way, I hope I'm going to try to. I didn't go to Harvard, just as a disclaimer. Okay. I went to Concordia, which is a local Quebec university, and McGill. So I'm really proud to have studied there. I think if on my side, at least the publisher hat, we're experiencing it very differently probably than what brands are. But I'll put on my advertiser hat and say, how would we prepare for this, and what are the things that we need to do? I'd say we have to reimagine measurement. And I'm not talking about re-architecting the past, because we're moving off this idea of retargeting based on cookies and moving to leveraging universal IDs or other types of unified IDs. We have to think of way of sharing calculating share of attention, or calculating different ways to measure brand performance. And that's going to be really critical. So every brand will have to go through their own experience, but with the deprecation of cookies, third-party cookies, there has to be a need to be thinking, how do we measure the effectiveness of media? And what is the attribution, meaning what is the impact of every single channel to our overall business target? And I can share my experience if that's a question, how we're dealing with it at Postmedia. The other one, please. The thing for us as well that is really critical, and I'd say for brands, because cookies are disappearing, is the value of a user landing on your website or your properties is significantly more important now. Traditionally, brands will invest, for every $9 they invest in media, they invest $1 for experience. And what we're saying is good experience is just good business. Happy users.
Wait. Can you give this data again about the dollar value?
Yeah. On average, and this is a very average data that was pulled from Google, for every $9 invested in media, only $1 is invested in user experience. So clearly we're valuing media more than the experience we're providing to users. And there's a guiding principle, just good user experience is good business. So you have to, there's more emphasis going to be placed on how to make sure we maximize the value. It could be profile enrichment, it could be user profiling. One thing we're going to have to work on is how do we capture more data about the users once they land on our website, even if they're not transacting with us. That's why experience is really critical. The other one is I'd say very important, I'd say in Quebec, but also probably across Canada, is respecting the people behind the data. And privacy is becoming really, really important. And innovation does not have to come at a compromise in this instance. I think you can protect, at least as our publisher, we can protect readers' data, and we feel more responsible that people are entrusting in us and visiting our websites, and we're able to gather certain insights about them, that they entrust us in how we share that information with the ecosystem. And there's a value to scarcity. So those are more like guiding principles, but I think they really apply to publishers and brands, both.
But thank you. Brad, what's your take? How do we prepare for a cookieless future, and how will it affect media effectiveness?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it's funny because we went through this obviously all, a couple of years ago when Google announced the deprecation. And I can say that it was like almost a complete freak out across all of our clients, right? And then it, it obviously got kicked down, the can got kicked down the road. And so it sort of settled down and it's been talked about less, but it's coming at some point, right? We don't know exactly when it's going to be in effect. But the way we sort of look at it, I would say, is don't be fearful of the cookie going away. The fact of the matter is, especially in the programmatic space, really good tech setups look at so much more than cookies. And obviously, as Basil mentioned, there's the live ramp ID and these new identifiers, UID 2.0. But there's so much that is looked at when making decisions about who to serve an ad to. So really what to think about is not one identifier versus another, but the focus should be more about matching the identifiers that are available to real people at scale. And that's just sort of a complicated way of just saying, have all your options open so that when cookies do go away, there's still a lot more that you can activate against. And that's really the case. So what we're sort of recommending to partners now is test, try it out. there's a lot of different ways you can test cookieless solutions today. I'll give you an example. We actually ran a test with a financial client. And finance was sort of one of the first areas that really raised their hands on this because of privacy concerns. And we ran a solution where we tested against a UID 2.0 solution, which is one of the new identifier solutions. We have a contextual solution that doesn't use any third-party data. And then we used our standard solution as well that uses cookies. And it was really interesting. The UID 2.0 performed the best of all three. It was still impacted by scale, and that'll improve over time. But it was really, clarifying to us, and also I think for anyone that's looking at this, it's going to be okay. It's just going to be, we're activating on different stuff. We're all going to be on the same playing field. It's just make sure that you're working with good partners that have their technology stacks in order.
Thank you, Brad. I think many of us are reassured listening to you and to Basil. Jerome, you work at a media giant. How is Quebecor preparing for a cookieless future?
So, I mean, for us, there's a few options. So there's some, what I would say, simpler systems which are using a lot of our offering, and that's being packaged in a way that are encouraging people coming on our sites to create profiles and logons. So that's one sort of very simple way of creating attribution, is the people are logging on so you know who they are. Then there's all the fingerprinting methods, which Brad and Basil have talked about. So that's there. But then really for us, the advantage we have within the Quebecor universe is that beyond the media group, we've obviously got, Videotron, as well as a bunch of other properties that are non-commercial, but have online followings. And so for us, it's all about how do we take this tremendous amount of first-party data that we have and find a way to anonymize it and use it in a way that can be useful to our advertisers. So, at the moment, we're not doing anything with all of our cell data because we're still, figuring out how to make sure that that's anonymized properly. But we are working already a lot with like set-top box data from Videotron. And, we've launched a platform that actually advertisers can log on to, and that allow them to create profiles and look at usage patterns based on the first-party data, as opposed to following people around using a cookie. So that's what we're working on. That's sort of what we're offering into the market. And it's in its first steps. It's a year old, and it's going to get better and better. But proper data and allowing people to get an understanding of who they're targeting is really, I think the future, compared to just a cookie, which was just, okay, well, I'm going to tag this person and then follow them along. And even if you look outside of Quebecor, I'll put my Vividata hat on for a second, and they're improving what they're measuring a lot. And they've launched products like Metrica, where they're doing a lot more robust measurement, allowing people to have access to much more information and be able to target. And Suzanne was talking about the micro-targeting, and I think that's also going to be a big part of the solution people are looking towards, saying, okay, I can't necessarily follow this person around, but I can find much more efficient ways of reaching the people I'm looking to reach through these different sources of data that are propping up that weren't, necessarily there before.
I think it'd be fair, Jerome, to check in with you in a year to see how it's going, just to compare.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely, right? Yeah. And I mean, we've had this system for a year. We've recently just opened it up to allow advertisers to go into it themselves and look profiles up. And we're working on solutions, working with third-party partners with data clean rooms, so that people can bring their own data and find ways to blend it with our first party while keeping everything anonymized. So these are all solutions that are on our roadmap. And that's what we're bringing into the market to help people as the cookies and the more traditional ways of targeting go away.
Very good. Brad and Basil, when we're looking at the full funnel of media activation, can you share some of the best practices? Basil, I'll start with you.
Sure. I live the performance hat. I had it on for 16 years in my career, and I think now we're seeing a shift. One is we're moving away from this campaign building. For this full funnel to really work, brands are recognizing, we're seeing this because partly its technology is enabling it, is now you can move to program optimization. And when you can move to program optimization, you could tackle marketing a bit differently and how you look at the full funnel. And there's a layered cake approach to this, obviously. It's what is that relationship you want to have with people living in Quebec? You define it as a business. You say, this is the relationship you want to have with consumers. That's your underlying top level thinking. And under it is, well, what are those experiences that deliver those relationships? So you could say, I want the relationship with my consumer to be like family. Well, okay, that's a really high standard. The experiences that lather to up is family checks up on you. They call you. You know, those are experiences that you build up. So you build your program accordingly, and they have to pay off. They have to be effective. They have to be measurable. They need to engage, and they need to, essentially, it's the building blocks for that relationship. And then the third layer is those moments. And that's where the rubber hits the road. How people check out, how you respond when people answer your call, what people click on when they look at your ad. I think that's going to be really critical. It's a bit more zoomed out to say, how do you look at your marketing? But that funnel perspective program overview is really key. And the rest becomes, now that we evolved our thinking and we established this, everything is just now tech enabled. So what is the tech tools, measurements, and KPIs that enable us to do so? Because much easier for teams, agencies, and partners to kind of work together around. Bit high level, but I just feel like this is really a much better partnership perspective between agencies, brands, and vendors.
Thank you. Brad, best practices?
Yeah, I agree with Basil. I mean, I think we're at a point where technology enables us to be more effective from a full funnel standpoint. And I think a lot of brands and agencies are coming around to that too. I think traditionally we like to have our brand media and our performance media in these two different buckets, but you know, it's the same person you're marketing to. You're just using different mediums to have touch points with them. So the most important thing to do is make sure you know, from a programmatic standpoint, make sure you have unique IDs so you know who you're serving ads to at what point in time. And then, you know, working on the right media mixes to put that into effect. And to Basil's point too, then it's measurement that becomes super critical, right? Having measurement tools where you can say, you know, how is my video impacting my bottom line? How is my CTV or audio impacting my bottom line? How is foot traffic being driven by these mediums? And being able to sort of pull these things together so you gain those insights to then again iterate and go, what's working? And you can also pull that apart for French market versus English market, and you might get some really interesting insights. I can think of one of my clients recently. It's a coffee brand, and they wanted to run CTV, and they said, you know what, just want to be in the morning hours. And we're like, okay, but someone, you know, a couple might be watching TV in the evening probably. So let's just like spread it out and see where it works. So we ended up finding out, lo and behold, yes, the sort of late afternoon, evening hours were the best times. But it gleaned an interesting omni-channel insight. We should be using online and mobile video in the morning hours to connect with them when they're on the move, right? So it's again comes down to having good insights to make smart decisions going forward with your omni-channel approach.
That's great. Thank you. So before we get to the questions in the box, in the Q&A box, one question for all the superstar panelists. What are your 3 takeaways when buying media in Quebec? I'm going to start with Suzanne.
I think the first one for me is really work with the local creator community. Really look and take time to understand the culture and work with that in your messaging. Don't just translate. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that organizations do. Pure translation, you don't get the syntax, you don't get the emotion, and it just does not work. And it doesn't resonate with the Quebec audience. And then identifying moments to engage and connect. I think that we've said this, we've mentioned this before, but on the 31st of December, it's New Year's Eve, Canada's watching, the ball drop in New York, and 4.8 million Quebecers are watching the Bye-Bye 2022. You have to identify those moments and really optimize them. I think that when organizations and brands do this well, it translates to the Quebec market.
Very good. We've done so much we've given bye-bye so much visibility. I feel like we should be getting some kind of check or something. Danique, what are your takeaways for when buying media in Quebec?
Well, first of all, and we mentioned it a little bit during this hour, act locally. Act locally, not only tactically, but to find insight, research, to really make sure and have a real, I would say, footprint in the market. That's really important. Like any other market, by the way. It's not just because it's Quebec, and I know maybe I'm not really objective with this. It's I really like Quebec, but it's important really to act locally. Also, I mean, the other thing is really, like I said earlier, but take nothing for granted. I mean, it's evolving, it's changing. Our role is really to follow the consumer. That consumer really change, move. With the last 2 years, we have definitely his mindset has changed as well. So I think as advertisers, we have to be pertinent, as we said in French, and utile as well. So for that, we need to make sure we question ourselves on how we work. And finally, maybe one thing really important is, we're always talking about the two solitude in Quebec, in Canada, and how, but you know what? I think one thing really important is to collaborate. We have, you have great media partners in Quebec, great media, great advertising agencies, great media agencies. If you need any help, any advice, whatever, I'm sure you can find somebody in the market helping you doing a better job. So
thank you. So there are two words that you use in French. I'm going to translate them, Danique. You said utile, which is useful.
Yeah.
And you said pertinent, which is relevant. Two very important keys. Brad, what are your takeaways when buying in Quebec?
Yeah, this has been great. I've really enjoyed everyone's perspective today. And, I think one thing we all agreed on was Quebec is a unique market, obviously. I think that goes without saying. So, but I think the individuals within Quebec are also unique, right? So make sure you're approaching it at as granular a level as you can to be effective. I think it's really, really important. And, I think being nimble and making sure the partners you're working with are future-proofed and prepared for the future, because as Danique mentioned, things are changing quickly, channels are changing quickly, data storage changing quickly. So work with partners that are prepared to adapt and make recommendations as well.
Thank you. Basil?
There isn't much that Danique, Suzanne, and Brad haven't mentioned that I can add, but maybe I'll just one point to finish off. I think don't be scared to innovate in Quebec. It's hard to explain it. You have to live to understand it. But there's something special about innovation in Quebec. When you talked about media opportunities, having lived in the province, I feel like Quebec, and I lived in multiple cities, is the best place where I've seen brand partnerships. I mean, when you go to the Jazz Festival, the Just for Laughs, I don't think there's any place in Canada that does brand partnerships as good as I've seen it in Quebec. So I'd say not to be lean in, and there's a lot of innovation that if done right, it's there. And to Danique's point, and Suzanne, like local, there's a local aspect. You just have to do it locally, but once you do it, there's a lot of room for innovation, and they covered pretty much everything else.
Thank you. Jerome, do you have anything to add? What is a key takeaway to consider?
I'll add one thing to what's been said, because I agree with all of it. We completely realize that making that effort to do it a little bit differently in Quebec is going to be a little extra work. I can tell you from our perspective, where we see almost everybody's campaigns, and we can see those that do and those that don't, and the return on your investment will be worth it. So it might look like you're going to need to put a little extra effort in to do all these things that everybody else has mentioned, to innovate, to adapt. I'm here to tell you it will be worth it. The return will be worth the extra effort. And like Denis said, there's a lot of people there to help you. So don't be afraid to ask.
Thank you. To the panelists, thank you. Please stand by. We do have a couple of questions and we have time to get them answered. So the first question is, how should companies and organizations based in English Canada tackle or find relevance in Quebec in the new Bill 96 and intercultural environment? Who's jumping in? I know I'm not.
I'll take it, Martin. I think that, again, it goes to what we've mentioned throughout this whole discussion, is that the Bill 96, it's really about preserving the culture, preserving the language. So I think the importance is just to make sure that when to keep it top of mind when you do a campaign that's going to be targeted towards the French Quebec audience. And we've heard it, I believe it's Jerome that said, you can also, like, if you do a campaign that doesn't resonate with the audience, you're going to fill it with your returns. So really, I think the Bill 96, it's really about understanding that we want to preserve a culture and a language in Quebec. And it's not that we're not diverse, but we want to make sure that what we have in terms of what we're fiercely protective of in terms of our culture and our language are taken into account when we work in this the province's environment.
Super, thank you. And to piggyback a little bit on that, are there discernible differences when tailoring messages for the Montreal market versus the region? We touched a little bit on it before, but maybe if somebody can give an example.
I don't want to put Jerome on the spot, but there's Jerome, the Québécois has Le Journal de Montréal and Le Journal de Québec that are different areas of the province. Jerome, would you have a...
We do, and I mean, we have the newspapers that are tailored to Quebec and Montreal, and obviously we will do, adapted things. A lot of my experience works more with national clients, where we'll tend to work more globally in terms of looking at the entire Quebec population, reacting more or less the same way. But there are definitely some local adaptations that we can do. And it'll depend. Sometimes you'll see, it'll really depend on the business. So sometimes with, businesses that are very much on the ground, with some of the QSR clients, things like that, there can be opportunities to adapt a little more locally. And we actually do certainly have, a lot of local stations that will do adaptations, and we do have media that are adapted to the local content, especially in the news. But otherwise, some of the studies we've looked at, when it comes to the actual Quebec content, the French language content, Montreal and the regions aren't that different. What you'll see is for the very small portion of like English language content that you'll find on Quebec networks that's dubbed, you'll see less reactivity in Montreal because often they're more bilingual and they may have watched it in English. But that's really more of a performance factor. In terms of what you're doing to reach your markets, it shouldn't make that huge of a difference.
And Martin, I'd like to go with what Jerome said too. It's not to neglect the English market in Quebec also, because it has an importance to reach them also, and they are. They do follow the same culture as Quebec in many ways. So if you just have a French campaign in Quebec, you are missing out on an opportunity to reach the English environment also. So I think that's important. And also what we discussed, it's like any market. There is the rural and the urban market, and it's the same differentiation when you're working with campaigns and how you're going to message them.
And if I may just... I think it's Basil who said that, Quebec, it's not Montreal. So I think it's in the way, what I mean by that is, and Montreal is not only French, it's English too, as Suzanne mentioned. So I think it's just a matter, again, it's, don't forget, if you're talking only to Montrealers, you're missing great urban or smaller urban areas such as Quebec City, Sherbrooke, and all that, of course. And also don't forget, because, for example, into the retail industry, we might think, because we are around Montreal, we are covering the entire province. Actually, not at all. So, that kind of thing, just think about that as make sure if you can cover properly the market where you are, and yes, see that as opportunity to grow.
And Martin Danick says something very important here also. With COVID, there was the migration of people outside of the urban areas where we're working from home. And I think that that's important. If you're only targeting urban Montreal, a lot of these urban Montreal dwellers have now kind of disseminated in the rural areas of Montreal, and they have the same consumption patterns, and you want to reach them definitely. So I think that that's a very important aspect when you're buying media in Quebec.
Another question.
I also think in terms of behavior, and I don't live in Quebec, but I'm pretty aware during the pandemic, you had the whole Palier Bleu initiative. And I think like Quebec products and things made in the regions have become much more to the forefront, right? And so even people in more urban areas have now become more aware of what's being produced and made outside of the bigger cities. And I think that's something that the pandemic kind of accelerated, is that awareness.
Thank you. And another question we got through the Q&A box is, does diversity, equity, and inclusion messaging have the same traction in Quebec as it does in the rest of Canada? To all of you.
Definitely.
I would stress it's necessary for a brand to resonate. I just say that's like you have to do that. Because that is the Canadian market. It's not just the Quebec market, I would say. It's a true reflection of what Canada is all about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've also been, sorry, I'll just comment on that too, is there are opportunities too, as far as like media planning and media buying, to work with partners to buy from BIPOC owned publishers and platforms. We've spent a lot of effort doing that and putting that together in North America, so that, you know, not just from the consumer perspective, but also from the media buying perspective, that you can at least assure that a portion of your budget is going to support these companies and these publishers that are BIPOC owned and operated as well.
I mean, and the Quebec government actually did a campaign about the diversity of Quebec. So I think it's important to say, when we say Quebec or French, it's a diverse group and different cultures. It's not just the French audience that was raised here, but the French audience that has now come to call Quebec home.
Important point. And another point is to mention that it did not go without controversy, that campaign, but that's a whole different webinar and we can get to it another time. Another question that came through: how do you think agencies can play a better role in showing their national brand clients about the unique media opportunities of the Quebec market? Who leads the conversations to invest in Quebec media? And I remember, Jerome, at the very beginning, you asked, is Quebec getting its fair share when it comes to budget? So maybe you wanna answer first that question.
Oh, sure. And I mean, I think, you know, what agencies can do is they need to take a look at how they're actually splitting budgets. And I suspect, and, you know, just looking at research, we think that a lot of agencies are using the opportunity that some of the Quebec media tend to have lower CPMs than English to sort of get the coverage with spending less money on it. And really they're shortchanging themselves, because spending what's very little of the English budget and putting it back in Quebec to its proper share, that same amount in Quebec will go a lot farther and get you a lot more than, you know, what it is you think you might be losing on the English. So I think the key is to look at how you're dividing up the budget, how you're using those dollars. Are you using them smartly, which I think what we've been talking about for a while. And other than that, I'm saying there's a tremendous amount of resources. I mean, like there's, you know, agencies in Quebec. There's also all the media owners, not just us. Like we're not alone selling English, I mean French. It's all have tremendous amount of research, independent research firms, all produce a lot of collateral and a lot of content that can be used to really try and understand better what's being put out there. And I encourage them to reach out to the different resources and to ask for data and information, I know we're happy to share everything we can to help the cause. And it's just all about talking about it and informing people and asking questions and taking a minute to look at what would this look like if I didn't just sort of copy paste my English and just roll it out across the country and not really worry about it.
Well, definitely, I feel the question. I need to answer that question. I see it really as our responsibility, and not only agencies, but all the different, I would say actors or the media star system who could play a role into this. It's really, I think it's really part of our job to make sure every advertisers in Canada know more about the uniqueness of this market. Again, not to say that we are different and so on and so forth, just to say, here's the opportunity. You should know there's different opportunities in that specific market, as there's other specific opportunity in other markets of Canada. So definitely it's our role. So, as an agency, we have to, we do that on a regular basis. And to be honest with you, since I began more than 20 years now, I'm still doing that. I'm still talking about, differences about Quebec, same thing as well, good or bad or whatever. Like, I think it's it's our role, it's our job. So please ask for any collaboration on this. We will be happy to help.
Thank you. Basil, I think you wanted to add something?
I think Denis and Jerome really covered it, but I would say I think I understand where this question is coming from. And traditionally, if I'm correct, there's not enough time to do planning and buying. And because you're constrained by time, more emphasis is placed on English. And then whenever time is left, then we plan for Quebec. And then, but actually what we're finding is there's an abundance of information available by media partners, by agencies, or even syndications on the Quebec market. And if we could establish, and my recommendation is always establish a good research mechanism so that you can complete your work and your research required for planning for the rest of Canada at the same speed as you do for the French market, because there's a lot of these resources that are available across all the regions so that it's not constrained. And because of the lack of insights, I think, honestly, the perception that there's lack of insight about the Quebec market might be part of the result why they're not getting their fair portion, potentially, of media. And this is just an assumption, but I know from the workflow, I think working on that is going to be really crucial. And partners, like Denis mentioned it, Jerome, there's a lot of data, and Postmedia has a lot of data on that. And once you establish that parameter, you might be able to move a bit faster down this path. And this is an assumption. I think that's where the question is coming from.
Thank you. Someone asked if there was going to be a recording of the webinar. The answer is yes. It's going to be up on the Ad Club website as well as Ad Club social and its YouTube channel. So with a few minutes left, all I can do is thank our amazing panelists for their insight and the great tips as well. I think all of us learned a little bit more about the Quebec market, even I who lives here. So it was really interesting. So to all of you, thank you. Thank you to Ad Club for putting this up, for making it happen. It was a lot of fun. And Jerome will check up on you in a year about Quebecers cookieless future, and the rest of you, hopefully we get to check in with you as well. So to everyone, a good afternoon. And
thank you, Martine, for being a great moderator.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Martin.
My pleasure. And we'll do this again. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.